Our final presentation this afternoon comes from Astrid Bridgwood. Astrid is a recent graduate of Queen's University in Charlotte, North Carolina, and will be crossing the pond soon to begin an MS degree in Contemporary Art History at the University of Edinburgh in Scotland. Her lecture is entitled Experimentation and Illumination, Investigating an Earthenware Fat Lamp. Please join me in welcoming Astrid Bridgwood.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Daniel. Before I begin, I would like to thank William and Susan Mariner for providing the scholarship funds which have made this research possible. I would also like to thank my partner, Caleb Watson, for supporting me throughout this process. A ceramic object and its maker are inseparable. Even unsigned, unclaimed vessels surviving centuries bear the marks of the hands which formed them. John W. Thompson's 1814 fat lamp exemplifies such witness marks perfectly. When I first encountered this object, it was Thompson's fingerprints which gave me pause. Unlike so many of the elegantly thrown teacups and jars common to craft ceramics, vessels whose makers carefully disguised their hands' imperfections with burnished smooth surfaces and vibrant glazes, this object shouted the name of the man who made it before I even read his signature on its surface. This lamp shows the ridges of Thompson's palm where he gripped the handle as it was pulled. Thompson pinched the clay at the lip of each wick channel. There, perfect fingerprints are preserved. I stared at this fat lamp and wondered after the life of the man whose hand complicates its surface. To tell a ceramic story is to tell a human story. The story of this fat lamp is inseparable from the story of Morgantown, West Virginia's John W. Thompson. Building from the ground up, we will explore Monongahelia's clay and pre-contact pottery. Then we will give an overview of Thompson's roots in Morgantown before we closely examine, contextualize, and analyze the object. Present in West Virginia is an abundance of coal and shale-rich soil. Shale's high iron content results in the rich red tone for which Thompson's early earthenware is known. Such objects are most often referred to as redware, named for the surface's deep color retained even after firing. An abundance of coal in soil often results in deposits of what is colloquially known as fire clay, a uniquely stable material capable of enduring high temperatures. These veins are perhaps what allowed the indigenous peoples of West Virginia to produce fine pottery despite relatively low firing temperatures. This clay did not require a high fire kiln to produce hardy ceramic vessels. Quality fire clay is found only along Deckers Creek, which runs through Monongalia County, in proximity to Morgantown and Thompson's pottery. Thompson likely dug from the same creek beds as those Fort Ancient female potters. The stable clay gathered by these potters fostered the county's indigenous ceramic activity long before Thompson's arrival, and likely supported Morgantown's thriving pottery community into the 19th century, nurturing a culture of ceramic craft. Recognizing the indigenous potters who first occupied a landscape is imperative. Such a holistic evaluation of potting in Morgantown allows us to better understand the material these ceramic objects are comprised of. Investigations of ceramic objects along the Monongahela River help us characterize the region's soil and reveals the process used to finish each object. Excavations of indigenous Fort Ancient settlements in this region have found, quote, black earth, filled with burnt mussel shells, traces of whitewashed clay, charcoal, and pieces of pottery, unquote, implying that a pit firing process wherein objects are buried with flammable material and baked was used. So begins a tradition of regional pottery, fostered by rich earth, harvested from clay beds which remain abundant to this day. Scholar of West Virginia ceramics, Shoji Satake of West Virginia University names Morgantown a pottery town from its founding, being home to the earliest post-colonial potters west of Appalachia. James Thompson Sr., John's father, moved his family from Bel Air, Maryland, first to Dorsey's Fort, just south of what was then Morganstown, circa 1785 to 87. John W. Thompson's family were among the first to settle in the region, which is to remain sparsely populated for the next 10 years. They arrived to a valley filled with smoke. Still reeling from the French and Indian War, destabilization which likely influenced James's choice to first settle at then safer, more well-established Dorsey's Fort. Soon after, around 1790, James purchased Morgantown's Lot 118, building the settlement's fifth home atop soil uniquely suited to ceramic production. Walter Ho, the Smithsonian Institute's assistant curator in the Division of Ethnology, published one of the only texts investigating the life of Thompson and his ceramic work in 1899. His report, An Early West Virginia Pottery, notes a pottery headed by one Master Folk as being Morgantown's first, quote, after the Indians, unquote. Ho claims that Master Folk established a pottery circa 1785. Later scholarship has determined that Jacob Folk Jr. in fact most likely resided in Frederick County, Virginia until early 1801. Morgantown's true early potter seems to be one John Scott, who purchased a pottery kiln site on the south half of Lot 7 around 1800, though court records can't confirm his position as a practicing potter. Soon after, Folk would move to Morgantown and quickly take his first apprentice in 1803. That same year, John W. Thompson begins his first known venture, a journeyman tailoring business, which soon fizzles out. In 1804, at approximately 22 years of age, Thompson begins an apprenticeship with Folk, a late start to a ceramic career which would be passed through generations. In 1810, 6 years after his apprenticeship begins, John W. Thompson purchases Folk's home on the north half of lots 24 and 25. By 1813, Thompson has begun to advertise pottery wares for sale under his own name. Despite having been working in pottery for nearly 10 years by this date, Thompson had not previously attempted to define himself as an independent potter in his own right. Thompson's desire to separate from Folk is perhaps due to a court case stretching from 1811 to 1812, during which Folk sues Thompson for assault and battery, the motivation for which remains unknown. It appears that no bad blood divides the two for long, however, as Folk soon purchases another kiln site on Lot 88, which passes between the two throughout 1814 and 1815. During this turbulent period, Thompson constructs his unusual fat lamp. In 1814, John W. Thompson sits before his wheel. He centers his clay, drawing the stuff upwards into a conical shape before pushing it down again to form a puck. One palm pushes inward as the other side of his hand flattens across the top. His fingers grip the rim of his clay to create a basin. Thompson creates a narrow opening in the clay's center, pulling the walls upward from the cylinder which would soon comprise his fat lamp's stem. Using the force of his palms, and likely a rib, his cylinder narrows, expanding and contracting. He uses rim formers to create the striations which encircle the lip of this unfinished neck, creating the rim atop which his lamp's head would rest. He throws a quick and diminutive bowl. Soon after, he will pinch this bowl to create 4 wick channels. The clay, still wet, will rip. He quickly pinches the torn rim together. The result is thin, irregular. Another lump of clay is used to pull the lamp's handle, which he lays curled on a table to form the handle's curled shape. Later, he will score the surface of his lamp's body and basin, affixing the handle to the object's side. Thompson uses the pad of his thumb to quickly smooth the seam where handle and lamp meet, though it remains largely undisguised. Later, when the object is leather hard, he will incise small decorations to the lamp's body, a blossoming flower on one side, a vine on the other. The object's form perhaps inspired these designs. Completed, the lamp resembles a flower, perhaps a tulip. With that same engraving tool, he signs and dates the lamp to the basin's outer rim. The work is ready to be fired, finished, perhaps sold. These vegetal and floral decorations become regular motifs for Thompson as his pottery continues. He changes his technique to clarify the image, angular incisions transform into elegantly carved stamps. He creates a similar stamp for his signature, claiming proud ownership of his work. It could be that Thompson's 1814 fat lamp represents the experimental beginnings of practices which would be refined as his pottery persisted, perhaps moving from incision to stamping. This change might also speak to increased demands he perhaps sought to meet. Incisions like those found atop this lamp are more time-consuming for a potter to complete. Community potters like Thompson and his mentor, Joseph Folk, responded to the needs of those who surrounded them, making work which was most often utilitarian. Morgantown's convenient location allowed potters to expand their markets further downstream as well. As the population of both Morgantown and these downstream settlements increased, demand for ceramics grew, perhaps requiring Thompson to hasten his production process to address an expanding market. This lamp is one of the earliest pieces by Thompson. No other four-wick lamps remain. Another, more normative fat lamp survives by this potter. Similar to the four-wick lamp, this later fat lamp is comprised of an unglazed earthenware, meaning it remains porous, and thus would retain traces of fat burned within. No such evidence lingers atop our four-wick lamp. No burns, no fat tacky surface, no residual smell. The lamp appears entirely unused, leading one to question its function. The lamp's surface is discolored in places, displaying irregular dark brown and gray toning. Upon first glance, one might think this is evidence of flame, perhaps indicating use. Upon closer inspection, we can discern that this irregularity likely results from a combination of surface treatment and kiln fire. Thompson most likely wood-fired his work, a method known to result in flashes of soot, which disrupt a ceramic surface. If this object was an experimental first draft, it is unlikely that Thompson, concerned with conserving space, would place the object in a consistently heated section of his kiln. This would likely be reserved for objects known to meet market demands, like storage jars, tableware, and other vessels. No object is guaranteed to survive a kiln firing. This uncertainty, combined with the object's strange form, which made guesswork of potential market success, might have led Thompson to push the lamp to a more irregularly heated area of the kiln, a choice which perhaps contributed both to the strange discoloration atop the object's surface and caused cracking seen to the basin's interior. Given the surface's rough and porous texture, we know that this strange toning does not result from a glaze. Instead, Thompson likely coated the surface in a manganese wash. Manganese surface treatments were increasingly popular following the year 1800 and resulted in dark brown coloration, meaning that Thompson probably had access to and some experience with such a commonly used material. Perhaps, if this work was an experimental attempt at a new form, he simply applied a wash over the object to allow for some toning, while remaining materially conservative. Most notably, fingerprints starkly reveal the earthenware lamp's natural terracotta coloring. Manganese wash, if handled roughly after application, will lift easily from an object's surface. This could account for the places where obvious traces of Thompson's touch remains. Ceramic fat lamps are one of the earliest examples of lighting used by ancient and classical cultures. Some, like this single-wick Moroccan lamp, display a comparable form and use similar techniques as those employed by Thompson, with the work being wheel-thrown and the wick channel hand-pinched. There remain almost no examples of four-wick ceramic fat lamps. This Israeli lamp is very similar to the well which completes Thompson's object, despite its lack of basin, handle, or stem. Thus, we can understand that Thompson's lamp possesses a functional precedent, though whether Thompson's lamp was itself successful remains a mystery. Fat lamps were more affordable than other options for artificial lighting emerging during this period. Wealthy households had access to Argan's oil lamp, a more sophisticated technology which allowed users to change the height and brightness of a flame at will, producing 5 times as much light as a traditional fat or oil lamp, and lacking the unpleasant smoke and odor. Fat lamps were cheap, a minor trade for a local potter which didn't need to be highly decorative. Fat's messy nature made these objects distinctly utilitarian, form dictated by function. Normative fat lamps of this period retained their historic shape: basin, stem, handle well. Some had 2 to 3 wick channels, lacking a basin, stem, and handle akin to that early Israeli lamp, and were likely to remain still well lit. If a lamp was intended to be portable, that is, possessing a handle, and did have multiple wicks, each would be carefully placed so as to avoid dripping fat onto one's hand. Thomson's lamp displays a 4th wick channel, which stands boldly above its handle. The lamp which Thomson constructed most resembles a 4-wick Betty lamp, lighting which emerged in the 18th century. These were utilitarian objects comprised of metal, largely iron or brass, and most often used in a home or workshop. Like a ceramic fat lamp, animal fat or grease would fill the lamp's basin. Wicks of twisted cotton would be placed within the channels and lit, emanating a dim light, considerable smoke, and a pungent odor. It is reasonable to infer that Thomson would have seen and used such a lamp, perhaps quoting the object in his ceramic form as he attempted to create a lamp which combined the ergonomic practicality of a ceramic fat lamp with the multi-wicked and thus brighter metal Betty lamp. In analyzing Thomson's lamp, we can see how he might have questioned a traditional ceramic fat lamp's efficacy, asking how he might improve its accepted normative form to compete with newer, expensive, and somewhat superior lamps, thus providing his community with more effective and accessible artificial lighting. Despite the intellectual curiosity and desire for innovation Thomson might have possessed, and which this object perhaps represents, his fat lamp does not display sophisticated craft ceramic technique. The fat well's irregular rim varies in thickness and shows evidence of repair. The wick channels themselves are imbalanced, all being different widths and having inconsistent spacing between them. Don Horvath and Richard Duez, authors of a Ceramics in America article exploring the early earthenware years of Morgantown's pottery, note that Thomson's teacher, Folk, produced pots which were, quote, significantly better than those attributed to John W. Thomson. They characterize his work as overall being, quote, neither well thrown nor well finished, unquote, his forms being relatively common. However, it is important to remember that Thomson was a community potter. His work was not mass market, nor highly ornamented, nor internationally coveted, serving instead as vital functional ware. This lamp is one of his earliest dated objects. As his career progressed, so did his potting skill. He could have been uninterested in these more well-developed finishes because of this object's experimental nature. If this object was successful, validating its reproduction, more well-finished lamps might have been produced. Later objects, like this pitcher dated between 1810 and 1830, show Thomson's more developed potting skills. This object is simple, but elegantly functional, with a more complete finish, having dark-toned glaze, though lacking any decorative adornment. The pitcher's handle is more seamlessly connected. The rim is more regular, as is the spout. Compared to the spouts or channels present to his fat lamp, refinement is visible. The pitcher is stamped J.W. Thomson, Morgantown V, displaying the clarification of his potter's mark as well. His pottery's sophistication appears congruent with an accumulation of wealth. From the 1816 to 1821 census, Thomson acquires 2 enslaved persons, both male, one above 12 and the other above 16, and purchases more land around 1825. In 1830, both he and his wife have their portraits painted, further underscoring his elevating class. It is during this period that Thomson likely engages less with his pottery, moving perhaps into the mercantile business. However, following the 1830 destruction of his pottery to a fire, a loss which amounted to approximately $1,600, it is likely Thomson returned to the potting profession. On Saturday, February 14th, 1852, a notification is posted to the American Union newspaper of Morgantown, West Virginia, informing the community of Thomson's retirement. The pottery will be carried on by his sons. Now consider John W. Thomson's legacy. His family settled in Morgantown when the region was still largely empty, recovering from a period of conflict which nearly decimated any opportunity for encampment, much less the construction of a formal township. Thomson began his apprenticeship at 22, far older than most apprentices in any trade or medium, with a man whose criminal record and unstable behavior likely led to interpersonal conflict between the pair during pivotal years of his training. This ceramic fat lamp was made as Thompson emerged in Morgantown and Monongalia County as a significant local potter, displaying an inquiring mind and desire for innovation. His lamp's lack of refinement is secondary to what it reflects of his maker, a potter who sought to anticipate the needs of his community, questioning the conventional utilitarian forms common both to the period and region. He raised sons who surpassed him in skill and business sense and created objects which persisted despite their utilitarian nature. Such objects are often used to extinction. The survival of Thompson's fat lamp might imply a lack of functionality. However, we must remember that ceramics possess a unique longevity. My father, himself a potter, notes that even his failed objects remind him of pottery's persistence across time. These objects will likely outlive him in part or whole. I imagine such a truth occurred to Thompson during his many years of ceramic production. It is the mystery of his fat lamp's functionality which makes it continually engaging across time. If, in 1814, John W. Thompson had thrown a normative, single-wick fat lamp, interrogations of his method and intention would not have occurred. This fat lamp's distinct form retains tangible traces of Thompson's personhood, forcing us to confront the mind, the man behind the object. Thank you.